Welcome to another exciting and informative episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast, the place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. I am your host with the most, Randolph Love the Third. And if you have not heard the third's the word, we have another great guest on the Entreprenudist Podcast. But before we bring them up, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Shieldwolf Strongholds, a wealth growth and protection company. When it comes to estate planning, when it comes to life insurance, when it comes to employee benefits, when it comes to retirement planning, if your plan ain't Shieldwolf, your plan ain't strong. If you are a business owner that wants you and your employees to retire higher than you would have prior, make sure you visit shieldwolfstrong.com or call or text +1 904 822 4262. Now to our guest. John Makarewicz is the managing partner at Faris Capital Partners, where he applies over 2 decades of business leadership and real estate investing experience to help clients achieve robust, sustainable returns. A devoted husband and father of 3, John combines the discipline he's honed from running marathons and hiking trails in North Georgia with his passion for developing an exceptional client experience. Drawing inspiration from the John Wooden School of Leadership and the mantra, how you do one thing is how you do everything, John believes in consistently showing up at your best. Whether guiding investment strategies, building strong company cultures, or playing the drums in his spare times, with a track record of scaling a business to a 9-figure multifamily acquisitions, 9-figure private equity asset, and now leveraging those skills in multifamily acquisitions, John brings an approachable, down-to-earth style that resonates with investors, partners, and podcast audience alike. John, welcome to the Entreprenudist Podcast.
Randall, so happy to be here, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. Listening back, it's almost a little embarrassing, but I think for me, the key component is that down to earth and approachable. That's really one of the top lessons I've learned in leadership, but we can kind of get into that. But so happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Man, thank you so much for coming. And we are the Entreprenudist Podcast, and we are professional individuals, but it's always a joke. And when you said that, listening back to that, it's a little embarrassing. I actually, I recently came across a YouTube video, right? Yeah. And here's what the guy said. Listen, I didn't say it. The guy says it. He says, if somebody walks into your room and walks in onto you masturbating, if you stop immediately, it's embarrassing to you. Right. But if you keep going, it becomes embarrassing to them. You got to treat what you want to do, your passion, your skill set, like that situation. If you say you're going to do something and you stop, that's embarrassing. But if you keep going, it becomes embarrassing to all of the people who doubted you in the beginning. Keep going. Keep going. And look them in the eyes while you're doing it. And it seems like you're somebody that kept going and you looked them in the eyes. Is there nothing that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I know now, I wish I knew when I started was, you can't do it alone. I think that, right or wrong, our country, we're in the U.S., right? We have a lot of mythology about the one individual, right? I mean, you can always go back to, the Wild West and, sort of the sheriffs that, tamed the Wild West, or a particular military leader or an entrepreneur who's achieved a lot of success. And so those stories of that maverick that goes it alone is kind of part of our mythology in a lot of ways. And so early on in my career, I was so economically motivated. Now, candidly, this was mainly when I was more in a sales role and not necessarily in leadership or management, but just trying to do it all and trying to, take it all on. And when I transitioned into leadership, that kind of continued, right? It was like this idea, nobody could do it better than I can do. And so, through, getting humbled occasionally where I thought I had this great idea and it just, fell flat or whatever, I learned over time the importance of the team, and that once again, nobody does it alone, and that business is a team sport, right? And I think the first step is if you really look at any, truly successful company, there's usually more than one person, right? Like if you think about Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, right? There's usually someone kind of behind the scenes, or like Steve Wozniak and, geez Louise, his name just flew out of my head, but the main guy there with Steve Jobs. I don't know why I lost that one, right? But that kind of first step is, if you're an entrepreneur out there, right, you need to have that number two, that person behind you that can help with the execution, be that voice of reason, and occasionally say, hey, no, I don't think this is that right idea. But in my prior company that had that 9-figure exit, when we started to achieve massive success where we were averaging 35% annual revenue growth and hitting 65% in some years, it was when we got really smart and realized we need to go find the best talent in the industry and then build a culture that allows them to go out there and do their job, right? And my job is to clear the decks, make sure they have the tools they need to be successful, but in a sense, kind of largely get out of their way, right? And so that's a lesson that it took me until like my 30s to really realize that, it's a team effort. You need to have the right people around you. And that even extends to your personal life, right? That idea you're the sum total or the sum average of the 5 people you hang around with most. And, sometimes realizing some friends, and it sounds harsh, but you sort of outgrow, right? I don't know if you've had this experience, Randall, but as you start to achieve success, you'll start to get some doubters and haters in your life and people that were close to you, right? And like, And so you mentioned something earlier, but that's my chip on the shoulder. I do have this desire to prove what I can do. And partly it came from, I never graduated from college. And I don't have a lot of regret and shame around it. It just, at the time, I felt like I was very fortunate. My parents could afford to pay for college. I was not in debt. And I didn't properly take advantage of that opportunity. And so coming home and getting into real estate, the intention was to finish college. I just got success in real estate and I kind of went off. But that's always in the back of my mind. Somewhere somebody's out there doubting me or thinking that like I can't do something. And even though it's in my brain and it's largely imaginary, that is that motivation, right? To kind of prove what can be done and what I'm capable of doing. But that would be the big lesson, that you need a strong team of people around you, personally and professionally, in order to achieve great success. And I wish I had just learned that a little bit earlier. I realize in the past, I probably left some people like in the dust a little bit, or, could have developed some relationships that would have been more fruitful today had I been a little more open to not being so focused on myself and my own goals.
Oh yeah. Innovation is in the team for sure. And I'm one of those people where, you got a segment of society that doesn't care, and then you got a segment of society that watches Star Trek episodes, right?
Right.
I don't necessarily watch a lot of the new stuff, but growing up, I used to watch a lot of those Star Trek episodes. And one thing that I noticed that's different in the new episodes, or when I have the time to catch them versus the old episodes, if you notice, and I don't know if anybody's listening to us, or you, John, if you still watch like those Star Treks, or if you ever did, but if you notice, when the old episodes, the captain used to just say what to do. Yeah. When in the new episodes, the captain asks everybody their opinion.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he executes.
Yep. That's right.
And a lot of times, what you're referring to, Gino Wickman from the book Traction, he refers to it as the visionary and the integrator.
That's right.
And yes, that's very important, because as a visionary, I consider myself to be a visionary. Right. A lot of times I have the amazing ideas and I quick start it, but I might not keep going on it because I just had another idea. But that integrator is taking that quick start, great idea, and they're implementing and putting everything into place. And without that integrator, without that team, and the team, you need at least 2 people. And there are a lot of correlations with religious texts to the way you should do things. They say wherever 2 or more are joined, I am in the midst. That you need at least 2 people to get things going.
You're right. And it's interesting you mentioned that. We're big fans of Gino Wickman. In fact, we use a lot of his traction systems in the day-to-day kind of operation of our business. But that's really the relationship I have with my business partner. Now, I do feel that I have a visionary sort of component to me. But what I've learned over time is I really like taking somebody's idea and figuring out not only how to implement it, but how to potentially even improve it a little bit and take that idea and kind of level it up a little bit. So my current business partner would tell you he's the visionary and I'm sort of the implementer, right? And so I really enjoy that kind of work. Problem solving is when I'm at my best in my brain. So, when things are going too well, sometimes candidly, I almost get a little bored and restless because I'm like, not that I want problems, but, when you have that problem or that challenge, that's really when I can like lean in and shine. But, another great book I read years and years ago that helped with my leadership, kind of, and it's related to this team concept. It was called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. And the idea that like in a meeting, I should be talking less. Like I should be talking maybe 5-10% of the time. Let the team surface, right? They bring a challenge, or maybe I do. Maybe I say, hey, I've observed this. What is everybody's thoughts? Let that brainstorming and sort of like open dialogue occur. And then my job is to filter and decide, right? Like what is the best approach? And through that, you get the buy-in, right? The team's, sort of engaged because they helped create the solution. So, a big fan, and you're dead on. And that's right. A business kind of needs both, right? And that's some of those relationships I even talked about, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak being a great example, Jobs being that visionary. And, I love that story of the first iPhones before they were to ship. I think they were a few months out, like 3-4 months out from shipping. And Steve Jobs had a prototype in his pocket, and he put his keys in his pocket, same pocket, and the screen got scratched. And he said, this is unacceptable. And they had to figure out in like 3 months how to resurface every single iPhone that had been produced with stronger glass so that wouldn't occur. And I'm sure that was very disruptive to the team and kind of caused a lot of heartache and pain. But had they not solved for that, the iPhone may have had a false start. Maybe people would have gotten and said, this is kind of a crappy product. And so, those opportunities sometimes as a leader that you need to create a little crisis and say, like, this just isn't good enough. And we need to solve it like tomorrow, like, let's get on it. Right. So, big fan of Gino Wickman, though.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Steve Jobs, he messed it up for a lot of companies. I believe he was the first company to go 24/7. Where because I just turned 40 this past December. I'm old enough to remember when everybody was only open from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember that. Like that was a thing. If it was outside of the hours of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you couldn't get nothing done. You couldn't contact anybody. It was it. You had to wait until Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern. And once he opened that 24/7 component, everybody had to fall in line. I come from the insurance industry, and insurance is an intangible product. It isn't tangible until you need it. And what ended up happening was, all right, hey, I'm paying you all this money to be my insurance carrier, but I just had an accident at 12 a.m. on Saturday. You telling me I can't reach you until Monday? This isn't a good experience to me. So then people had to make it to where they can get these things available. And it does create another level of stress to the team. Because one of my favorite quotes in Gino Wickman's book, Traction, as it relates to the integrator, he says, know thyself and be stressed.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a tough thing when you have a great integrator and a part of what makes them brilliant is that stress, but you also want to help relieve that stress, but then it might also reduce their effectiveness. How do you balance you and your team, you and your partner? How do you balance knowing that, hey, we're doing great, John. Your face doesn't have to be so red right now. How do y'all balance that of you still having that healthy level of stress for what it takes to be a good integrator?
Yeah, I mean, literally, I think stress is a mechanism for me that I leverage, right? I lean into it a little bit. And, I will say that partly just, how I'm sort of wired. And, we can get into behavioral assessments I've taken over the years, personality assessments, but I'll go back to sort of school, right? Like a deadline, like fast approaching, like that actually was when I did my best work. And I sort of realized that. And, I try not to be the guy writing that paper at midnight the day before it was due, but sometimes that would happen. And what I learned is that stress is really, energy and action. You just have to decide where to put it, right? And so you can go inward and get frustrated, or you can take it outward and say, okay, let's use this as energy to help me solve this problem or help me get to that next step. When it comes to the team, and they're bringing me their own stress, like they just need to vent or have something going on, what I've learned is that the main thing is just to listen, let them speak. Like, don't try to offer solutions immediately, right? Just like listen. And, that's about 60% of it. And then once they kind of get that out, it's sort of like, okay, so based on what you shared with me, what are some things you think we can do to help remedy this situation, right? And then from there, we can start getting into action, right? And deciding how we're going to approach this situation. But, being open and available, for example, we're a very small team. And so, just inherently, it's easy to get to know everybody and know when maybe they have a personal challenge. Recently we had a team member whose father fell ill and it was looking likely they would pass. And so giving them some space and some freedom, take some time off, like digest. And, some companies, we're hard drivers. We set big goals and we have big expectations, but you can balance that with that people first approach and recognizing that when somebody's in that kind of situation, they're not going to make great decisions. So just give them some time to kind of digest and see how I can maybe step in to help. So a lot of it is, going back to Gino Wickman, we have a daily morning huddle every day. So, we're going through the, good news and an update from the prior day, their number one metric, and then their number one priority for the day. But we also have space for stucks and challenges. So the team can surface those in a meeting. And, what I found in life is that sometimes the person closest to the problem, it's like they can't see the forest for the trees because it's like right in front of their face. So sometimes it's a marketing challenge, but, maybe our finance director has like, hey, what if we tried this, and so just having that, that open forum where people can surface those challenges. And then even on our weekly meeting, we do the IDS, identify, discuss, solve. So we surface a major issue that maybe a team member's having, and as a group work to create a plan to help them solve for that. And then going back to that culture where, the way I view it is when I go tour one of our assets, as an example, if I see a cigarette butt on the ground, I'm going to pick it up. You could say, well, John, you're the president of the company. You should be like, no, nothing's below me. I'll do whatever it takes to succeed. And so building a culture where, the people like myself and my business partner are sort of willing to do anything and everything to be successful, from picking up trash to, calling an investor that maybe one of our salespeople is having a challenge with, shows the team that we've got their back and that support. And I think that's a big part of it as well. When people know you've got their back and they have that ability to bring you challenges where they're not going to be judged for them, that's so much of it, in my opinion. Just having that ability to just have an open forum and listen and not be judged, when you have a challenge. Now, look, if there's a true performance issue, that's a different conversation, and that's sidelined for a one-on-one or something like that, where we might get into our values and say, hey, you're kind of not honoring this value here. One of our big ones is speed of execution. And we've been hearing from investors, it's taking 2 days to get back. That's unacceptable. So what can we do to solve for that, right? You have to have those tough conversations, but every day stressful things will happen to the team. So just allowing them to bring that to you with no judgment and a kind of solutions first approach is such a big part of it, right? Building that trust that they know they can come to you.
Oh, yeah. And I definitely want to get into the description of the best person to introduce you to. But as one more thing that I want to touch on as it relates to the way you run your company, same way I run my company, once again, thanks to a large part to that book Traction. You mentioned core values.
Yes.
One of the things that I like about core values is when you're hiring based on core values from the very beginning.
Yes.
If and when the person that you have in a position that they don't seem to meet up to where you want, when you can go back and look to a list of core values and say, hey, all right, we really wanted them to do that thing. When we look at these core values, they still live up to our core values. So maybe we shouldn't fire them. We should just move them to another position.
Right.
Because, the cost of training, finding new people, training them up, making sure that they, are somebody that fits the culture. Sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do compared to just moving somebody to a different position off those core values. Before we get into like the description of the best person to introduce you to, have those core values made it easier for you to gain and retain talent?
Absolutely. I would say, 100%. And you nailed it. We often used to say, right person, wrong job, right? Where you got the right person, but perhaps you just found them in a position that's not best suited for them, right? So that opportunity to maybe shift them into a new role. one of the things we use in our hiring practice, because you're dead on, like my questions that I ask, we have a 3-step interview process. So, it's not just a one and done interview. And so the questions are kind of crafted around those values, right? And sort of looking for specific examples of, if it's a service level role or a sales role, like give me an example of a time, an investment wasn't going well and you had to have a tough conversation with an investor, and what was the outcome of that conversation, right? Seeing how they would have approached that situation. Are they totally transparent and honest? Do they, create a plan? Do they outline those next steps, right? One thing we've done in addition to the values that I think is super valuable and something all companies I think should do as well, and where this came from was a book I read called Culture by Design. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head. I read it like 10 years ago, but it stuck with me. So you can find the book pretty easily. But the concept is taking your values and actually defining the behaviors that, are those values, right? So if we say first-class service, some that we would have as a fundamental is show up on time, and we define that, make sure you're on time and ready for every appointment. If you have a scheduled call, you need to call at that time, right? Use clear and concise language when you communicate, right? Sometimes, especially in finance, and I see it with the investments I'm in, they use all these colorful terms of art, and they're almost trying to mesmerize you a little bit with language, where just speak plainly, just tell people what's happening. We had a miss this quarter. Here's what we're doing about it. Versus macroeconomic trends are doing the. It's just, we just missed the mark, and here's what we're doing about it, right? And so by defining those behaviors that really meet the value. And then the next critical step, and I know you know this because you're big on values, is you have to talk about them all the time. You can't just put them on a poster on the wall or introduce them on day one and forget about them. So, for example, every once in a while on our huddle, Mark and myself, my business partner, may just say, all right, everybody, we're wrapping up the huddle. Everybody type our core values into chat and, let me know when you're done. And on the count of 5, hit send, just to see, do they actually know them?
Off the top of the head.
Yeah, just like, hey, what are our core values? Type them into the chat. Now, don't do it in a punitive way. We're like, I'm going to meet you after the call, but it's just now they know that question could be coming at any time. We do it with our mission as well. And, those fundamentals we actually highlight. We have 38 of them. So every day in the huddle, we start with one of those fundamentals. And then after we hit 38, we recycle. So just that constant reminder of what the things that are important in our culture are. Create an experience, right? Don't just book the investor, great. Like, how can you make it a little bit better for them so that they go, what a great experience. That looks like removing friction from the process. It can mean so many things, but when you really define it, I think that's where the magic happens. But I actually invested in a startup recently, and they grew their sales 50% last year. And he's talking about his goals for this year. And then all of a sudden, through our conversation, I realized he had never developed a mission or vision or values. And so it's like, okay, drop everything on your planning, get that done first. Now, when you build your plan, you're thinking about the mission, you're thinking about the vision, you're thinking about those values. And so when you present this to the team, you can roll that, out and then show how these goals relate back, right? And so I think a lot of people do them because the books tell you need to do them, but often they end up as a poster on the wall and they're forgotten about, right? I mean, I use the joke, Enron had integrity, honesty, and trust etched in granite on their entrance into their office building, right? And we all know how Enron ended. Certainly, if it was honest, transparent, or whatever those things were. So you have to live them. And as the leaders, right, me and you, if we don't honor them, then we give them permission to everybody else to avoid them as well, right, and not pay attention.
Oh, yeah. I still remember one of our, because you do the people analyzer. Yeah. And that was one of the things to where do we say the core values every meeting and then realize, oh, man, we just got a bad grade. And ever since then, yes, every meeting, at the top of every meeting, of course, we're talking about what's good happened since the last time we met, but we're also saying those core values, reiterating them and making sure that we're living up to them. And we've even consolidated them over the time, where we had, I believe, 10, but now we have 7. It didn't make us less valuable. It made us more valuable as far as us really getting into what's important to us. For example, we recently added intuition. We have intuition because it was one of those things to where I don't, and of course, the whole goal is to hopefully take intuition off to the table as a leader. When you notice that things aren't intuitively happen, quote, per se, then that's when you need to add that to your SOPs, right?
Yeah.
But one of those things was just intuition, like, dang, like, why don't you know this? Or, but meanwhile saying, all right, no, we can't get them in trouble for not being intuitive if it's not a core value.
Yeah.
So it moved from there. So yeah, we definitely relate on a lot of subjects. So that said, sounds like you have a great culture, great team, great partnership, and a person or persons or a company would benefit from aligning themselves with you. What is the description of the person that we should introduce to you, or the company that we should introduce to you?
So for us, we have a very simple business at the end of the day. What we do is we go out and we acquire underperforming, underutilized apartment buildings, typically built 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Our two constraints in the business are our ability to find deals, which right now there are some market headwinds. If you know kind of investment in real estate in any way, you know that after the pandemic, we saw an explosion in valuations. It was overheated. And, unfortunately, a lot of people didn't follow Warren Buffett's advice, which is, when everybody's greedy, get scared, and when everybody's scared, get greedy. And so there was a lot of people that were just snapping up deals because, they were looking at their exits from the prior few, and they exited at the peak. So, that idea, the party will never stop. And guess what? It did. And so valuations on some of these buildings are down 30 to 40%. Now we're starting to see that improve. So maybe say today, 20 to 30%. But deal flow has been challenging. Capital raising is our biggest other constraint. So from somebody to introduce to me or the company, we have successfully raised just under 60 million in capital in 3 years for a newer company. We're very proud of that. But somebody who could help us refine, our mission at Faris Capital is to go full out for our investors and provide the best investing experience in the world. So that would be probably an area where I would say we have a pretty good program, but it could always be better, and that continuous improvement is always top of mind. So that that would be a relationship. Someone who can help us maybe think through how we're attracting investors to us and honoring that mission and providing that best investing experience in the world.
So when you go into those multifamily unit deals,
yes,
and boom, you just acquired it,
right?
What's some of at least one or some of the first things you do to instantly increase the value of that newly acquired property? Yeah. Or is that a thing?
It is, absolutely. So what we saw, because we're big study. We if you're new to something, right? I mean, there's books, like whole books on my industry, right? I mean, there's like probably 15 or 20 really well done books that kind of outline the steps that it takes to be successful in this industry. So, go out, whether it's YouTube or audiobooks or podcasts or whatever, learn. And so we did that step. And one thing we found is that a lot of these guys that are in this business, or people, I should say, they tend to focus on things that are important, like unit renovations. Because, for example, if I take a 1990s style unit with laminate countertops and carpet, and I do a complete total renovation with granite, new appliances, new cabinets in the bathrooms and kitchen. I mean, we take a B building and turn it into what feels like an A at a value. But what we noticed and observed is that a lot of operators would sort of slow play their capital deployment. And so what we've decided to make us a little bit different, it is one of our differentiating factors, is the day we close on that new asset, our contractor is on site starting work immediately. And what we realized is that if we can demonstrate to the current residents that, yes, a new owner's come in, but we're providing value before we're asking for anything in return. And I think that's just such a key lesson, right? Like over deliver on value, because, whether you're selling widgets or whatever, sometimes the instinct is to lower your pricing or whatever to be more competitive. But if you provide more value, you can keep your pricing where it needs to be. So, day one, we're trimming trees and we're redoing the landscape and we rebrand the asset. But in the first 30 days, our goal is to do all of the exterior renovation work, from painting, if we need to do that, new shutters, new doors, new lighting. We'll enhance the amenities. And then we have a resident event and the whole team comes. So myself and my business partner, which is very rare. So for example, our property managers told us they've never done a resident event where the owner of the building actually showed up, but we do. Mm-hmm. And we spend our time talking to residents, like, what do they like about the property? What do they don't like? What do they wish they had? We can't fulfill all those requests, right? But just being heard is such a big part of it. And then what that allows us to do, because in our business, we renovate, say, 3 to 5 units a month, and you can get a premium rent for that because you provided a better quality product. But the current residents are more important in a sense because they're already there paying rent. They ideally already like the community. So when they see that they've gotten more value from what we provided, like we've added a gym, we've redone the pool, put in grilling stations, built a dog park, when we go to renew their rent and we're asking them to pay a little bit more, they're happy to do it because they've gotten something in return. And very early on, it was interesting. Our Largo deal, our first deal, when we closed that, we executed on that plan and we got a review a day after the resident event. The guy said, I've lived here for 12 years. You're the fourth owner that has, owned this property while I've lived here. And this is the first time I felt a difference, and, customer service, right? Like leasing centers are open 6 days a week. You know how many times I've gone to tour a property as a potential comp, where I just want to kind of make sure the comp's in line with what we're thinking our rents can be, where you get to the property and there's just a sign on the door that says, call my cell phone if you need me kind of thing. And you call them and nobody calls you back for an hour or two. So those residents that are already on site use that leasing center for maintenance requests. They just like to pop in. We keep the refrigerator stocked with snacks and drinks so the kids like to come in. So just being available, right? I mean, client experience, you mentioned that in the intro, I provided there. I think client experience so often is a disruptive sort of thing you can do in an industry because so often it's, you talked about it, right? Where it used to be you can only get in touch with a company between 9 and 5 or whatever. Hell, nowadays, the other side of it is, you're available 24/7, but I'm talking with an AI chatbot that's not paying attention to what I'm telling it, right? Mm-hmm. So being available, answering phone calls, returning emails quickly. We guarantee maintenance requests will be done within 24 hours unless a part needs to be ordered. These are simple things you can execute on that make a huge impact. And so what we actually learned in our industry is that the most important customer is the resident at our building, because if we take great care of them, then the income will come in from rent and, they'll renew and stay in the property longer. And then the investor is well looked after, right? Sort of the Costco philosophy. Hire great people, they'll take great care of the customer takes care of the shareholder. In our world, we hire great people, take care of the residents takes care of our investors. That's how we think about it.
Oh man, that's great. And I definitely would love to have an on-site podcast with you at one of your future resident events. That'll be great to actually show y'all in action, actually intermingling with the residents and showing what a retro unit looks like compared to a unit that feels like an A, like you said, at a value, right? That'll be great. Because and I'm familiar with what you're saying because, I bought my first home at 22 because my mama, she was one of those people that said she was the opposite of what a lot of families, because I grew up middle class. Mm-hmm. She was the opposite of once you turn 18, get out.
Okay. Yeah.
What she was you can't leave until you buy your first home.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
You can't leave until you buy your first home. So that gave me a leg up. Right. Yeah. So, but I did have a renting experience. I actually lived in Atlanta for a few years, and that was the only time that I rented. And I distinctly remember when I was looking for a place to stay, and he's showing me around. We're looking at the common areas. We're looking at the unit. It looks good. Like, yeah, everything looks good. Let's get going. So I'm signing the paperwork, and he says, as he's putting everything, just casually says, and sometimes due to market conditions, the rent goes up when you renew. And I say, sometimes due to market condition, it goes, he's like, sometimes due to market conditions, the rent goes up. And I said, well, does sometime due to market conditions, the rent goes down? He's like, oh no, it never goes down.
Yeah, that's right. And I had an example recently. My son is at University of Georgia, and he had transferred from another college in Tennessee, Belmont. And so he has some roommates now, but last, kind of in the fall, he had his own apartment for 6 months. And the notice requirement was 60 days if you want to terminate early. His plan was not to terminate early. It was just to give notice at the end of the lease. And he sent the email a day before, just not because it was like we signed it on the 13th. They were claiming it's the 12th. And the point is, we get this email saying we owe 60 days in rent. And what they knew was that for me to go to an attorney and have them review the lease and send a demand letter was going to cost me $1,000 at least, right? And so they knew they could get away with it. And I was indignant and upset for a minute, but then I realized, look, easier just to pay it, lesson learned, move on. But guess what's going to happen once this is resolved? Two things. Number one, since they're saying it's a 60-day notice, we're not turning the keys over for 60 days, even though the place is sitting vacant. Like if I'm paying the rent, I'm not giving you back your unit, number one. Number two, once that's all said and done, I'm going to be posting a review, online. My son likely will as well. And it's just so interesting because if they had just said, we see that you sent us a day early, we know what your intentions were, we'll just give you the 30 days like as required. I probably would have posted a 5-star review, and I probably would, and all this stuff. And it's just, so this short term, you got 900 extra bucks out of me or whatever, but now you're going to get bad reviews. I might even go to the real estate commission on this one. Probably not. I've also learned sometimes, you can allow things to really bother you and get revenge, or you can just say, that's a pain in the butt. I'm just going to let it go, not allow it to, mess with my brain space. Right. So likely just a bad review, but it just goes back to just treat people like you want to be treated. And if somebody accidentally sends something in a day in advance, don't try to punish them for it. Just say, oh, your notice needed to be tomorrow, but based on your intention, we'll do the 30 days, right? But now they're going to get bad reviews and all this other stuff. It's just short-sighted thinking, right? And I think, one of the things in business I've learned is you got to have like a 10, 20-year view, and when I think about Mark Spain Real Estate, the company we exited, from the first day I started, my business partner, at the time, I was just hired as a salesperson, but over time, he gave me equity and I kind of built trust and ended up as the CEO of the business. But he was sort of like always articulating this 20-year vision, right? And so one thing that I think is very helpful for a company too is when we talk about a vision, our vision is a 2-page document. It's not just 1 or 2 sentences. And it literally is the future state of our company in year 10. Like what should have happened by year 10? What are the various client appreciation events we'll do? Like what does our average review rating look like across our assets, right? And when you have that kind of a plan, it may not look exactly like that in 10 years, but it's going to look pretty darn close because we have that North Star every day where we're going, is this the vivid vision? And on a quarterly basis, we review it together. And as we knock items out, it gets highlighted in green, And so the goal is at 10 years, it's just a big green highlighted document, right? So having that future vision and not just thinking a day ahead, thinking like 10 years ahead or 5 years ahead or whatever. This was a short-sighted decision this apartment operator made that, it's not going to put them out of business, my bad review or whatever, but hey, every 1-star review somebody gets, they got to get 5-star to take it out.
To make up for it, yeah.
It's just like, just be nice, be a human being. And then, maybe I would have perhaps referred clients to them because they did have that short-term lease option, but now I'd say avoid them like the plague, right? So it's interesting what some businesses choose to do.
Oh yeah, and being human being is kind of subjective, right? Because in that same time frame of my renting experience, so I had I stayed on the second floor, right? Yeah. And it was at the end of one of the aisles to where there was the dumpster at the end of the aisle. Mm-hmm. And they had one of the older dumpsters to where after the dump truck came and dumped it and set it down, if the lids were closed, you literally had to be, which I'm pretty sure there are some women that could get that lid up, but you had to be a man to just to throw that lid up. And what ended up happening was, due to that fact, a lot of people used to leave their trash at the dumpster because they couldn't open the lid or they didn't want to get their hands dirty. So I used to be the one, like once I saw it, I would use all my might and get that lid open. So what ended up happening is that property got acquired. And of course, they saw that was an issue. So they got brand new dumpsters and dumpsters that had the side doors, right? Yeah. So made it very convenient for the residents to put their trash in there. And I distinctly remember I'm sitting on my balcony.
Yeah.
I saw somebody walk from the very end of the road down to this dumpster. It was very methodical.
Yeah.
And they got to this new dumpster. And prior to this happening, we got a notice in the mail saying, hey, we heard your concerns. We bought you a new dumpster. Please put your trash in the dumpster. If you don't put your trash in the dumpster, we don't want to do this, but it'll be a $150 fine. Right. So, this notice literally just went out the day before. So I'm sitting on the balcony. This person slowly and methodically walks to the dumpster. The door is open.
Yeah.
And they just sit the trash right there. So sometimes, regardless of what you do, you're dealing with some people who are just being human. Whatever your definition of human is. How do y'all overcome that?
Yeah. We try to be, look, I mean, that is sometimes the thing you have to do, right? Lease violations and just, unfortunately disincentivize a certain behavior. But what we found is that not everybody reads every email, right? Not everybody looks at every text message. And so, you don't always have to do it 7 times. But one thing I learned early on is that, especially in a large organization or any sort of group of people, to have a message heard, you have to kind of say it 7 times, 7 different ways, right? And so, in this context, that would look like an email. We can send out a text message to every resident. But guess what else we can do? We can put a flyer on the door and then knock on the door. And if they're home, just say, hey, really wanted to share with you some exciting news. We just got a new dumpster. So, we heard the concern around how the top would close there. So we're just asking every resident to be just mindful of putting their trash in the dumpster, right? So we sent an email, a text message, maybe left a voicemail, knocked on their door and put a flyer. So I guess I'm 1 shy of 7. But by doing that, what's also happening is when you're knocking on that door, it's just an opportunity. How's everything going? How's, maybe their kids are in the house. Like, how's school going this year? And just build a relationship. And so a lot of our property managers are on a first name basis with their residents because they're just interacting with them. When a maintenance request comes in, for example, our property manager's responsibility, even though the maintenance supervisor is doing it, the property manager follows up to say, hey, I know radio was in your unit recently working on the garbage disposal. Was everything fixed to your satisfaction? And occasionally, for example, we had somewhere there was a leak above and some drywall fell down. And we fixed it, but the woman said, yeah, everything's great, but, candidly, a bunch of dust got in my toaster oven. And we said, say no more, show us your toaster oven. We went on Amazon. It was like $49, bought her a new toaster, delivered it to her, just to go a little bit of a wow situation because, gosh, it's $49 for us, but like we got a 5-star review out of it and that kind of an idea. So over communication, but don't just send out an email and think your team's going to understand what you're talking about, and so in that context, you may send an email out, you may send a text message, you might mention in 2 or 3 huddles and a level 10 and, over communicate, right? People don't always hear the messages. We had a situation in our HOA recently where one of our neighbors took it upon themselves to do some tree trimming at the front of the neighborhood and kind of demolished a shrub. And they just sent an email out. And guess what? I saw the guy back out there yesterday. And I'm going, the guy doesn't probably check his email. Someone needs to go talk to him and say, yes, this message went out to the team, but we're kind of talking to you. Like, you need to knock it off. you know? So, it's just interesting. I think so often we look for shortcuts in life. And it's like, doing 5% more sometimes is all it takes to go from like okay to good to like exceptional, right? Just doing 5% more, just knocking on a couple doors versus just sending that email, right?
What's your definition of success?
My definition of success is realizing that enough is a feast, right? I think that so often we can find ourselves in these situations where, and I'll use myself as an example. We had talked about selling my previous company for so long. It was this big goal. We started the process. We're going through everything. Now we're in due diligence. It's like this long 9-month process of due diligence. And in my mind, I thought that when this deal closed and that, my percentage of equity hit my investment, my account, that something would change. Like I would just feel different, like weight lifted or whatever. And guess what? That didn't happen. I didn't really feel any difference, right? And so I was assigning too much, self-worth and value to that thing. And what I actually learned in that situation, I left that company 4 years ago. I guess it was early 2021. So 4 years ago. And, I just got a handwritten note the other day from somebody. I haven't talked to this guy probably more than that. Cause he was an agent and just talking about the impact that I had on him and his career and things like that. And so I've learned about myself. That's really my motivation, right? Economic to me, money is important. It's freedom. It's things like that. And, but it's like, for example, I lived in the same house I've lived in for 12 years. The deal closed. I could have taken some of that money and gone and bought a big old house. But I'm like, you know what? I like it here. I keep it simple. So success is, I think about the Boy Scouts sometimes. Like how I think about life is I'd like to leave, the world that I touch, not the larger world, but the people I touch in just a little bit better condition than I found them in. If that's creating a company that has a bit better culture where people are happier to work, if we can create a better resident experience where people, feel valued and appreciated for their patronage of our building, like that's success to me. Helping others, right?
That's a good definition of success. Is there not a question that I did not ask you that I should have?
No, I think we covered so much, man. I mean, I think, I touched on those fundamentals, some of those business rhythms and things like that. Using another example in another startup I invested in, it was interesting. And you'll appreciate this as a Gino Wickman guy, but they were doing well, but there was just some clunkiness and they were having some challenges. And so as an investor on one of the quarterly calls, I was like, well, what's your meeting cadences look like? And it was almost interesting because it's like, they didn't even, I'm not being funny. They just like, what do you mean by meeting cadence? And I'm like, well, morning huddles. Do you have like a weekly meeting? What do the one-on-ones look like? And I realized everything was very ad hoc. And so I sent them a document that we use internally that here's what our huddles look like. Here's what our meetings look like. And I kind of made some quick edits to it. They rolled that out and they their trajectory the next year just through the roof. So if you're running a business, look for the meeting rhythms, look for the opportunity to constantly bring up those values and that mission. And you'd be surprised at how many problems get solved very quickly when you just have the right systems in place, the right tools. Oh yeah. Everything is a rhythm. Everything is a cadence. Yeah. And then, of course, that rhythm creates a vibration. And Nikola Tesla, he says, you want to know the secrets to the world, look at vibrations, right? Look at all of these things, right? Definitely great conversation. And once again, hopefully you or one of your team members reaches out to me so we can do one of those on-sites of how y'all engage with the communities. I think that would be great. One more time. I'll shoot you an email and maybe we can kind of figure out the logistics, but I would love that. That'd be a lot of fun. Let's do it for sure.
Do it. Oh yeah. I got the mic, I got the camera, and I got the intent of highlighting the good things. One more time, let everybody know who you are, what do you do, and how they can get in touch.
Yeah, so I'm John Makarewicz. I am a president and managing partner at Faris Capital Partners. You can find me at fariscapitalpartners.com. That's FARIS. Or LinkedIn's a great place to connect if you wanted to just, maybe talk about investments we're offering or just connect on business and business rhythms. I'm a big fan of just relationships, meeting new people. So LinkedIn's a great place to connect with me as well. Thankfully, there's not too many John Makarewiczes, so you should be easy to find me.
Oh, man, exactly. I tell people I'm not the only Randolph Love, but I'm the one that Google likes.
There you go. That's right. 100%.
Absolutely. This has been another exciting and informative episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast. I am your host, life strategist and retirement planners, Randolph Love III. And until next time, don't play with it, stay with it until you make pay with it. This is the Entreprenudist Podcast, signing off.